The global trade landscape remains a volatile arena, with recent developments highlighting an intricate strategic dance between the United States and China. As high-stakes negotiations concluded in London this week, observers are dissecting the latest moves in a protracted economic skirmish, suggesting that Beijing is deliberately drawing out talks to consolidate its own strengths, particularly through its formidable control over critical minerals. The New York Times, reporting from Hong Kong, posits that if Chinese leader Xi Jinping were to author a guide on the art of dealing with Trump, it would likely advocate for exploiting the American president's perceived weaknesses to exert maximum pressure while simultaneously leveraging the ensuing time to bolster China's own position. This appears to be the core of Beijing's strategy since President Trump escalated tariffs on Chinese goods in April, aiming to rebalance trade flows. Rather than capitulating, China has leaned heavily on its dominant control of rare earth minerals, materials indispensable to American industries, and has skillfully redirected the dialogue towards procedural discussions rather than substantive concessions. Indeed, the recent London talks following a similar meeting in Geneva last month were characterized by analysts as maneuvers that keep the United States mired in negotiations over vague procedural steps, such as merely setting a framework for future discussions. This approach, critics argue, allows China to sidestep thornier issues like Washington's accusations of unfair industrial subsidies, overseas dumping, and restrictions on foreign companies operating within China. Jonathan Chin, a fellow at the Brookings Institution and former CIA analyst, articulated this dynamic, stating, "I think China is very comfortable with this cycle of economic skirmishing with the United States, followed by episodes of diplomacy that merely return to the status quo ante." He further warned that this cat-and-mouse game keeps the United States from making any headway toward addressing any of the underlying U.S. concerns about China's unfair non-market policies. This pattern, rooted in China's long history of frustrating economic dialogues, enables Beijing to deflect American pressure while continuing its economic and manufacturing buildup on its own terms. A prime example of China's strategic leverage is its near monopoly on rare earths and the magnets derived from them, vital components in everything from electric vehicles and aerospace to robotics and semiconductors. In a direct response to the Trump administration's tariffs, Beijing previously halted shipments of these critical materials. Even as talks progressed towards a potential resumption of exports, China was reportedly intensifying its crackdown on rare earth smuggling to further tighten its grip on supply. Kirsten Astle, a former intelligence advisor at the U.S. Department of Defense and head of Astle Advisory, noted, "We can see the increasing measures China has been taking behind the scenes to get a firm central hold on strategic materials exports," adding that this allows Beijing to tighten or loosen with great precision and responsiveness to political conditions, signs it's being ready to be used as repeated leverage for a long time to come. The immediate aftermath of the London talks has been marked by ambiguity. While President Trump declared on his social media platform that a deal was done and that full magnets and any necessary rare earths will be supplied up front by China, Beijing's response has been less explicit. He Yadong, a spokesman for China's Ministry of Commerce, merely stated that China had approved a certain number of compliant applications for rare earth shipments and would continue to strengthen such approvals. This nuanced language, according to Wang Yuexing, director of the Institute of International Economics of Peking University, is likely a deliberate strategy to maintain the threat of export restrictions as leverage. He described it as not a complete loosening but also not a complete ban like before, creating an intermediate state that grants China greater proactive flexibility should the United States intensify its pressure. Despite China's strategic advantage with rare earths, Xi's approach is not without its own set of risks. President Trump's inherent unpredictability means he could unilaterally revert to higher tariffs or impose other punitive measures if he perceives a lack of progress or continued delays in rare earth exports. Furthermore, China's domestic economic vulnerabilities have grown since the initial trade war. Its export engine has slowed, the property market is still grappling with a crisis, and the promising electric vehicle sector is contending with overcapacity and a punishing price war. The government's recent announcement of guidelines to address people's urgent, difficult, and pressing needs in education, elder and childcare, and social insurance, albeit lacking specifics, hints at underlying concerns about public discontent stemming from economic slowdowns. However, Chinese analysts suggest that Mr. Xi is betting on his ability to outlast Mr. Trump in an extended trade standoff, believing the American president is more susceptible to domestic political pressures. As Xindingli, a scholar of international relations in Shanghai, succinctly put it, domestic politics is the soft underbelly of the United States. This divergence in strategic timelines, Xi's long game versus Trump's quick wins, underlies the current impasse. While a May truce had brought tariffs down from a staggering 145% to 30% for Chinese goods, and Beijing had slashed its levies on U.S. imports to 10% with a 90-day deadline for a comprehensive deal, the current state of affairs suggests a return to the pause rather than a definitive resolution. Trump's assertion of 55% tariffs on Chinese goods, including existing duties and new fentanyl tariffs, further underscores the complex and layered nature of the trade relationship. Ultimately, the latest round of talks in London has done little to fundamentally alter the strategic dynamic between the two economic giants. Instead, it has reinforced a pattern of calculated ambiguity and protracted negotiations where each side seeks to maximize leverage while minimizing concessions. The underlying structural issues of trade imbalances, intellectual property, and market access remain largely unaddressed, signaling that the art of the stall may continue to define U.S.-China economic relations for the foreseeable future, perpetuating an environment of uncertainty for global markets and businesses alike. The global economic landscape remains in a state of heightened anticipation following a flurry of diplomatic activity and pronouncements from Washington, as President Trump declared a trade truce with China done even while simultaneously threatening to unilaterally impose new tariff rates within weeks. This duality has left markets and industries grappling with profound uncertainty despite initial relief over de-escalating tensions between the world's two largest economies. The recent breakthrough emerged from 2 days of intensive and at times heated discussions in London, culminating in a framework agreement on Tuesday, June 10, 2025 that awaits final sign-off from President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick noted that both sides had to get the negativity out before making progress, signaling a shift towards positive trade, growing trade. Key concessions reportedly include China agreeing to upfront supply of magnets and any necessary rare earths, while the U.S. will allow Chinese students in its colleges, a significant sticking point that had emerged following a mid-May deal in Geneva. However, reports from the Wall Street Journal later indicated that China's easing of rare earth export curbs would only be for a 6-month period, potentially giving Beijing leverage down the line if tensions resurface. This aligns with concerns from experts like Véronique de Rugy of the Mercatus Center, who suggested China is hurting. Yes, but they still hold the upper hand on critical resources and they know how to use them. Indeed, an exclusive Reuters report on Thursday highlighted that Chinese-backed militia are securing new rare earth mines in eastern Myanmar, further solidifying China's control over the vital minerals. The impact of rare earth shortages has already been felt, with India's top carmaker Maruti Suzuki cutting near-term production targets for its maiden electric vehicle, the EVA Tara, by 2/3 due to supply constraints. Despite the apparent progress on the U.S.-China front, President Trump's subsequent comments have injected fresh volatility into the global trade narrative. On Wednesday, June 11, he told reporters that he would send letters to trading partners in the next week or two, setting unilateral tariff rates. At a certain point, we're just going to send letters out, saying this is the deal. You can take it or leave it, the president stated. This announcement comes as the administration's 90-day tariff pause, instituted after earlier steep duties roiled markets, approaches its July 9 expiration. This deadline, dubbed Liberation Day 2.0, could trigger a new wave of tariffs on many countries. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent attempted to clarify the administration's stance, telling Congress that it is highly likely the tariff pause would be extended for the 18 important trading partners who are negotiating in good faith. However, the president's direct threat to unilaterally impose rates suggests a more aggressive posture. The ripple effects of ongoing trade tensions are already evident across the global economy. The World Bank slashed its global growth forecast for 2025 by 0.4 percentage points to 2.3%, citing high tariffs and uncertainty as a significant headwind. Data shows Britain's exports to the U.S. dropped sharply in April, marking the biggest monthly fall since 1997. Japan too warned that tariffs threaten its economic growth, with former Bank of Japan policymaker Takako Masai suggesting that U.S. tariffs may have ended the BOJ's rate hike cycle due to the hit to exports. Domestically, U.S. ocean imports from China plunged 28.5% year-over-year in May, the sharpest decline since the pandemic, as 145% tariffs on Chinese goods took hold. Yet paradoxically, the Treasury Department reported a fall in the U.S. monthly budget deficit, largely due to increased customs receipts from tariffs. Some domestic industries like U.S. aluminum producers have even benefited from rising prices fueled by import duties. Meanwhile, May's Consumer Price Index (CPI) report showed inflation pressures eased on a monthly basis, despite concerns that tariffs would accelerate price increases. Market reactions have been mixed. Initial news of the U.S.-China framework saw pre-market upticks in heavily China-exposed retailers like Nike and Walmart, though gains were modest given that tariffs appear to remain in place. Conversely, the dollar hit a fresh 2025 low on Thursday as concerns about renewed unilateral tariffs picked up. While market volatility had reportedly subsided earlier in the month as trade uncertainty declined, President Trump's latest comments have undoubtedly muddied the waters. Legally, the president also received a favorable update this week as a federal appeals court held that his tariffs can temporarily stay in effect, overturning a lower court's ruling that deemed their enactment method unlawful. As the July 9 Liberation Day 2.0 deadline looms, the global trade landscape remains precariously balanced. The delicate truce with China, seemingly a step forward, is now overshadowed by the president's intent to set unilateral tariff rates for other trading partners. The coming weeks will be crucial in determining whether the administration opts for a more conciliatory path of extended negotiations as suggested by Treasury Secretary Bessent, or if President Trump follows through on his threat of take-it-or-leave-it ultimatums, potentially triggering a new wave of trade disruptions and further impacting global supply chains and economic stability. The world watches to see if the fragile consensus can hold or if a new chapter of trade friction is about to begin. The geopolitical landscape is increasingly defined by a palpable tension between the United States and China, a dynamic underscored by recent developments across various domains, from strategic space initiatives to regional military posturing. This intricate interplay signals a concerning acceleration in military competition and a deepening of strategic mistrust, raising questions about global stability and the future of international relations. A significant point of contention has emerged with the United States' planned Golden Dome space-based missile defense system. China's official military newspaper PLA Daily issued a stern condemnation on Thursday, warning that the initiative could threaten global strategic stability and trigger an arms race in outer space. The commentary asserted that the development of the Golden Dome system, coupled with the rapid expansion of the U.S. Space Force, further militarizes outer space, potentially intensifying great power rivalry and challenging established international arms control norms. Beijing has particularly highlighted Washington's recent steps to accelerate the $175 billion program, including the establishment of a technical integrated planning team led by General Michael Getline, Vice Chief of Space Operations at the U.S. Space Force, who was appointed Direct Program Manager last month. The PLA Daily's strong rebuke reflects China's deep-seated concern that the Golden Dome plan reveals dangerous trends such as the U.S. Space Force's attempts to develop offensive capabilities, signaling a perception that the U.S. is obsessed with absolute security at the expense of strategic balance. Beyond the theoretical battleground of space, concrete military encounters continue to punctuate the Asia-Pacific region, further ratcheting up tensions. On Thursday, Chinese jets reportedly flew as close as 45 meters to Japanese patrol planes in the Pacific, Such dangerously close encounters, while not uncommon in recent years, underscore the heightened risk of miscalculation or accidental escalation in contested air and sea spaces. These incidents serve as vivid reminders of the thin line between deterrence and direct confrontation, particularly in a region already fraught with territorial disputes and competing strategic interests. Amidst these rising military temperatures, the enduring question of Taiwan's future remains a central, highly sensitive flashpoint. While Beijing maintains its long-held stance on reunification, analyses from various geopolitical observers continue to highlight the immense, potentially prohibitive costs an invasion of Taiwan would entail for China. Publications such as Responsible Statecraft, for instance, have pointed to significant reasons why Beijing might find such an undertaking economically, militarily, and politically unsustainable, serving as a powerful deterrent against direct military action and emphasizing the complex calculations involved in any potential cross-strait conflict. Adding another layer of complexity to the U.S.-China dynamic, even seemingly domestic military movements within the United States are being scrutinized for their international ramifications. A recent deployment of Marines to Los Angeles, for instance, has been framed by publications such as The Diplomat as potentially a gift to China. This perspective suggests how internal U.S. actions, even if not directly related to foreign policy, can be perceived through a geopolitical lens and potentially leveraged by Beijing to bolster its narratives or strategic positioning, highlighting the pervasive nature of the great power competition. Taken together, these developments paint a picture of a world where strategic stability is increasingly fragile. The rapid advancement of military technology, particularly in emerging domains like space, coupled with a lack of robust arms control frameworks, risks pushing the US and China into an accelerating arms race. The frequent close encounters in key strategic waterways and airspace further amplify the potential for unintended escalation. As both nations continue to navigate this complex and competitive landscape, the emphasis on deterrence and the urgent need for effective de-escalation mechanisms will be paramount to preventing these tensions from spiraling into broader conflict. The trajectory of U.S.-China relations, marked by these intertwined military and strategic challenges, will undoubtedly remain a focal point for global observers in the years to come.